Welcome along, everyone. It's nice to see you all here, some familiar faces. Thank you very much for attending. Welcome to this session entitled Meaningful Conversations, and hopefully that's an apt descriptor for what you'll get out of this session today. We're going to be talking about emotional development with our panel. And I wanted to open just by saying we saw the power of kids' media to educate during the pandemic, but what about its ability to spark conversations, especially about challenging topics? How can we as media professionals, all of us, how can we help kids prepare for the future and open up discussions about things like gender identity, grief, and climate change? So we have a great group of guests on our panel today. I'm going to ask each one of them just to introduce themselves briefly in turn, and then we'll get into the session. So, Michael.
Thank you, Jo. Michael Shields. I'm a producer, writer and voice director, and I'm a member of the leadership team of Akamar Films, and we produce the preschool show for the BBC called Bing.
Estelle?
Hello everyone, it's great to be here. I am Estelle Lloyd. I'm co-founder and chief operating officer of Macadamia. Macadamia is the parent company behind the Azumi and DaVinci streaming platform and channels. Azumi is for kids under 6. It's almost exclusively with our global device partner Huawei, and then DaVinci is 7+ and families. And it's distributed as a streaming app and on many channels in 22 languages globally.
Thank you. And Nigel?
I'm Nigel Tomasi, co-founder and CEO of the manga brand Mayamada, and we work across manga, actually gaming as well, and youth engagement through workshops, work experience and things like that.
Great, thank you. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Michael to come to the lectern. I think he's going to show a short video first, but Michael is going to tell us about the work that he's done with Bing and why it's important to start building emotional resilience at a really young age, and where you've started with Bing. So over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Jo. Would you run the VT, please?
Let's go and see.
Okay.
Through Bing, children have an opportunity to expand their vocabulary, to learn new words, and also to learn and understand the emotions that they're experiencing as well. Because Bing takes place within a context that's familiar to children, children already have a good background knowledge of the situation that they're seeing.
I definitely think emotions is a big kind of part of it. She can say to you, like, oh, that's made me sad, or like I'm having a more emotional literacy.
Oh no! Oh, Bing! I am disappointed.
Oh, sorry, Bing.
That dynamic of being taught and him asking questions and the wonder and seeing it through Bing's eyes is the beauty of Bing.
Go on, Froggy, jump!
Bing is there to support you as a parent almost and be like, look, we can help you through this. It kind of reinforces what you're trying to do, really. It's kind of a nice thing to align your parenting to.
There's always a lesson, and teaching Bing to kind of deal with disappointment, and then we can refer back to that in our daily lives as well.
Oh dear.
You know, coming up with challenges, trying to find a way through it, working stuff out, and that's what life is all about for me. So that's the example that I want for my children.
It's a Bing thing! It's a Bing thing!
Good morning. So there's two themes for the whole CMC. One theme is power up. So this morning we're going to talk about meaning, and we're going to talk about power up. And I'd like to cover 5 main areas. One is, what actually is early child development? What is that? 2, what is story? Why are we all so keen on story? 3, what are the conditions of childhood? Where are our audience and what are they experiencing? And then finally, I don't know about all of you, hands up who was inspired by David Olusoga last night. Yeah, fantastic. I want to cover civics. And lastly, I want to make an impassioned argument that producing media for children is really a noble calling. It's something that is incredibly meaningful to do with lasting, profound, long-term benefits. So back to early childhood development. I looked up the statistics this morning. So when a child is born, they have 100 billion neurons in their brain already. That's been a packed schedule to get to that. It relies on lots of preconditions to happen happily. But they have only about 2,500 synaptic connections. So the equipment's there, but it's not joined up, right? By the time they're 2 or 3, each neuron has formed about 15,000 synapses. The things that what gives us cognition is the joining up. What does it take to join these up? A happy, nurturing household, love, a safe place, nutrition, but it also takes engagement and stimulation. And one of the pieces of equipment that join those neurons up is story. That's what story is. It's equipment for brains. It's really important for children right across the spectrum. It's really important for human beings right across the spectrum. But from 0 to 3, it is a critical nutritional need. And if it's absent, you never get back that deficit, right? This is meaningful, important work. So what conditions are children in? Right, here's a quick straw poll for all of us, 1 minute. Hands up if either you, one of your siblings, or one of your parents during your childhood experienced bereavement, unemployment, long-term illness, addiction to anything, alcohol, drugs, shopping, sex, extreme poverty, if you had a single parent, if you had multiple changing parents, if one of your parents was depressed, anxious, neurodivergent, not able to cope, if one of them was incarcerated. Put 2 hands up if 2 of these things apply to you. And I look around the room. What I'd like to say to you is these are not exceptional circumstances. This is normality. This is life, right? This is not on the spectrum out there different. This is what we're all dealing with. If into that situation, it might be a poor household without Bowden furniture with a single parent who's really pressed. If you put really well-crafted story, you're putting equipment into a household and you're answering a need. Okay? Let's come to power up and civics. In our industry, there are really fantastically committed people working in Parliament, working as lobbyists, working in the CMC, the Children's Media Foundation, to make meaning about how important this is. And they are clever, skilled, and industrious. Are we succeeding in influencing the agenda for regulation? One of the things that David said last night is, I hope we come to the end of an age of pre-regulation. I hope that too, but I'm pessimistic about it. How do we do that? Well, let's look at what that means, right? How does civics work? Debate, discourse, and meaning. You argue persuasively, like Izzy Garbett did last night. Wasn't she fantastic? Clever, charming, credible, authentic, persuasive, right? David was calm and persuasive. You argue your case. You then influence policy. You get appropriate regulation. That leads to the right kinds of support and constraints, which leads to funding, which leads to opportunity. All good creative work takes money. That leads to production of story, which reaches an audience. And I would argue that these stories have the power to enrich, modify, change, progress a civic society. So if you don't get this civics bit right at the beginning, if you don't argue persuasively for your case, what you end up with is, the beginning of my career, we had the BBC, ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5, Nickelodeon Cartoon Network. Now we've got the BBC, Milkshake, Sky, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, YouTube. Are they the same? Are they giving children the nutrition that we all had? No, they're not. We need to argue vociferously for public service broadcasting. Otherwise, the powers that be in that echo chamber that we all know about will regulate it out of sight because their mates in big companies want them to do so. So, last point, if you're choosing a career in children's media, you're not choosing it because it's easy. You wouldn't be here if it was easy. Expect it to be hard. Expect to meet passionate, committed, talented people, and expect it to be really profoundly meaningful. And please think about, pay attention, get involved with your civics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. Boy, that 5 minutes goes quick, doesn't it?
It does.
Next up is Estelle. Estelle, come and tell us about your focus with Da Vinci, which is very much focused on family conversations. So explain to us a little bit about how you do that and the types of conversations that you're looking to prompt. Please join us.
Thank you, Jo. Michael has very eloquently explained the why, so thank you for doing that part. I was going to introduce some of our latest originals, which you probably have seen. It's on the badge here. It's called Becoming Extraordinary. So at Da Vinci, we own the world's largest library of educational entertainment content in 22 languages. 13,000 hours to be precise. We do very few productions ourselves, but we have done one this past year, which we are extremely proud of, called Becoming Extraordinary. It's a co-production with Bear Grylls, Becoming X, and it's about resilience. It's about finding the path to success, whatever that means for you. And it's about creating meaningful conversations around the road to get there. So I'm going to show you a bit of a trailer about it.
My first ever match, I lost 6-love, 6-love. I really struggled.
I couldn't even keep up on the parade laps. That was how much I failed at the beginning.
Where you are is not who you are. You must leave behind more than you take away.
We've filmed some of the most inspirational people on the planet to understand what it really takes to succeed.
That's why it's so important to have a good teacher in your life.
It's loving what you do that will keep you pushing through.
In Becoming Extraordinary, we'll explore the skills, knowledge, attitudes to help you to realise your potential.
Suddenly I was just like, oh my God, I've done it.
Suddenly I had this medal. I actually was there where you were just yesterday.
You're standing here, now at the top of the world.
I just remember feeling like, oh yeah, this is the place I want to be.
Because greatness isn't born, it's learned. So, who can you become?
Thank you. Goosebumps, and an enormous privilege to be working with this type of talent. So, Becoming Extraordinary, 20-minute interviews with the world's greatest legends in their fields. As I said, an absolute privilege to be able to hear the backstories. And that's really the key here. We're not focusing on the red carpet moment, and we're not focusing on who they are today, but instead we're looking into the road to get to that incredible moment of the pinnacle of success, and really finding parallels and really identifying inside these stories the key moments, the key decisions, the key takeaways from the journey. I'm really focusing on the journey. Many to really highlight here, but one that I love was Team Peak, UK top astronaut, did not get the grade to get into the astronaut squad, and waited another 10 years before he was invited to join the European Space Station. And just hearing the journey, those 10 years of resilience, and joining the helicopter squad instead, and continuing to build the skills and continuing to build the relationship, and really having that resilience and not losing the end goal, the side of the end goal, which is, I want to see the Earth from above. And hearing his story is actually captivating. I watched it with my children, who are between 10 and 17, and the conversation did take place. The conversation was about what you have to leave behind and all the sacrifices, all the everything that you have to consider when you're in one of these journeys. We were particularly amused by Roger Federer's story when he said that when he was playing tennis with his friends in his backyard, he created a poster that said, the future greatest tennis champion lives here, and pinned it on his door. So from 10-year-old, he knew he wanted to be the GOAT, the greatest of all times in tennis. And he actually made a big statement about it. That was really his thing, about keeping sight of his end goal. And I love that story. I think when we heard that as a family, I think my own kids were kind of intrigued about what they would write on the door if they had to write something. So far they haven't. But it's really, so again, sparking conversations about, it looks easy from the outside, but really understanding what it takes to be Roger Federer, to move away from your house at age 14 to the US, to a training camp, leave behind your family, your pets, your friends, everything that you know, and arrive somewhere, live with a host family for 1 entire year, see your parents twice during that time. It kind of sets the stage of what's required. Equally, there are some more nuanced stories sitting behind it. I love the one of Ursula Burns, who became the first Black CEO of a Fortune 500 company. And when that happened, and the announcement was done, she started getting messages from Michelle Obama, from Reverend Chapton, saying, this is a defining moment. You have achieved something that is going to change history. And she didn't realize, and she says it so profoundly in the film, that she hadn't realized that her journey was also, the driving force to her success was also because she wanted to break that barrier. She wanted to be the first Black female CEO to be of a Fortune 500 company. And that is really powerful, finding really what drive individuals. Julia Roberts said it as well about fulfilling the dreams, the unfulfilled dreams of her parents, who wanted to be also actors and ran a theater company. So just a few examples of what sits in these films. As I said, it's been fantastic working on this project. We are already starting on season 2, and look forward to the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Estelle. I think you'll all agree it really reinforces, both having heard from Michael and Estelle, what a responsibility and an honour it is for us to be in this business. It certainly brought it home to me. So, third up is Nigel. Nigel, manga and anime, they're well known for addressing some hard-hitting issues, actually, compared to what some might say is a more sanitised view that we often present in Western media. So, how does this particular form of storytelling that is enjoying a huge surge in popularity amongst kids, how does that help them face quite challenging issues? Over to you.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for outlining that. Give good context so I can just come and talk about cartoons and comics. My personal interaction with anime and manga, consumed it a lot when I was quite young. I don't know if there's anyone in the room, show of hands, who is into anime, manga. Cool. Oh, that's really good. I usually only need one, but multiple is good as well. And then for myself, I sort of fell away, not consciously, but just sort of fell away until I started a business in the field and started making manga and maybe one day anime as well. And then started working with young people in workshops, in schools, in youth hubs, things like that, and seeing the connection that they had. So then I learned a lot. So I've done a lot of learning over the years through observation and just seeing the unique connection that the medium has with young people and trying to understand why that is. So I think there's a few reasons, and like you said, it's that ability to sort of broach those difficult topics. Not that other mediums don't, not that Western cartoons and comics don't, but it's in the way it does it and why it has that connection. So it can be sort of simple things as the visual language of anime and manga. So it can come across as a stereotype often when you see sort of big eyes and extreme expressions. But what I realized that does, it makes a really good emotional connection with young people. So it's very easy to see when a character is happy, when a character is upset, when a character is confused, when a character is slightly suspicious of another character because they're doing weird things. So it's very easy to make the connection if you're a young person, and then associate your own feelings of the situation with that character, and then take that into your own life. one of the things for me that I found like helped my connection, and definitely for sort of young people at that stage of life, is the types of characters that are put forward as lead characters. So I'm a big fan of Marvel. I feel I've watched like all the films now, which is a little scary to think, but I don't necessarily identify with someone like Captain America, like Iron Man, as much as I would like to, because but what happens in anime and manga is often the types of protagonists, the types of lead characters that are put forward would be side characters in Western comics and Western animation. So you often find in anime and manga characters that are unsure of themselves, that doubt their own ability, that have had some great sort of potential put on them, and question whether they are able to fulfill that. But it's their journey. So it's them. There's this sort of, I feel, this universal theme of anime and manga of like never giving up and going through adversity. And you see characters who start off their journey as very unsure, who have people around them who might be lead characters in if it was a sort of Western story, but they are supporting the protagonist to build that emotional resilience, to get through the situations, to get through the difficulties. And if you're a young person at school, very unsure of yourself, not sure like how you fit in, I've been in many sessions where young people say they don't have skills, which is kind of sad, but it makes sense that then you resonate with those characters in anime and manga that also feel that they are not able to fulfill that potential, but then they eventually do. So it's about going on that journey. And then, as you said, like the themes, the difficult topics, which is quite amazing the way it does it in that it will put on complex themes around religion, around death, around identity, around friendships, relationships, in a way that doesn't necessarily talk down to the young person. And I feel that if you are someone who can like understand those topics at a young age, it sort of prepares you better later in life. And anime just has a very good way of doing that. So for our brand, we make use of the medium, and we've created our own universe within that. So we try and take some themes that are relevant to us, but also hopefully universally relevant to others. And we've created a universe with different stories within that. So, for example, one of the stories that we have is called Sirius, and it's about a young rabbit. All our characters are animals also. A young rabbit called Blake. He's from a small, poor neighborhood, but he has this ambition, this dream to make it big in the business world. And he starts off the story with his partner in crime, and they're like going around the neighborhood selling like phone cases, and then his partner's friend gets taken away because she's from the big city, and he doesn't understand why. So he sort of has that first knockback, and then he goes on to different neighborhoods, putting together a team to sort of prove that, you know, he can do this, he can show that he's got that ability. So it's that journey. It's about having that resilience to go through those situations. And it's just one of the examples within what we do as a brand, using the medium to hopefully make something that is entertaining, but also has those deeper themes as well. So got a sort of few panels from some of our comics that we can run, whoever's in control of the magic of the technology, the screen. Yeah, so that's just an example of like the story.
Thank you. Right, now we're going to have a Q&A with our panellists. I'm going to set my timer going for about 15, 20 minutes or so, and then we'll open up the questions to you, to the floor. So now that we've heard from you all about who you are and what you do and why you do it, which is very important, I'd like to delve into some of the questions that we've talked about so far in prep for this panel. I'm going to start with you, Michael. First question, is it more important for kids to laugh than to learn?
I'd like to say both and rather than either or to that. I think one of the difficulties is trying to analyse children's narrative needs from an adult perspective. Once you get past the age of 4, you want novelty. You want a new episode, something new. But if you're 2 and 3, the thing you thrive on is repetition. They love to laugh. They absolutely love to laugh. And they love to be entertained and they love to be informed. They're young children are actually elite consumers of stories. There are no 3-year-old couch potatoes. If they're not interested, they're off. They don't suck down a pizza and a bottle of beer watching something they think's a bit shit. So they love to laugh, they love to learn, they are fully engaged with story or they're not. So the bar is high to keep that audience engaged.
And Nigel, in your view, can you then make a series that's both entertaining whilst kind of creating and exposing those strong values? Can you balance the two? How does anime do it?
Yeah, I think it's important to balance the two, actually. I think it's a way for younger audience to be engaged with a story in a way that they feel is authentic. So, like I mentioned earlier about not speaking down to young audiences, and they can sense it. They can sense when it's like someone's created this to instruct me and I'm not sure if I'm going to get on with it. But if they see a character who they can relate to, they'll go on that journey with them. They'll laugh with them, they'll cry with them, and they'll take on the lesson. So if you're able to build a story that is an entertaining story, is a funny story, but also puts the characters in situations that the audience can like relate to and learn from and apply in their audiences, I feel you've done a good job.
Yeah. Some parents aren't very comfortable with entertainment creators talking to kids about tricky topics. Back to you, Michael, and then I'll come to you, Estelle. What's your response to that?
So what tricky topics would you be thinking of?
Well, for preschoolers, could it be anything about like identity, gender identity?
So I think if you're pre-5, I don't think we need to be talking to you in a didactic way about gender identity or sex or politics. But what we can do is we can create authentic stories that reflect a diverse life, a diverse reality. So our characters are pretty diverse. They look diverse. Our voice talent is diverse. Our writers are diverse. And they're not all neurotypical children. So I think this subtlety of giving them story that really authentically reflects that is giving them equipment that is just built into that rather than a waggy fingered lesson.
And do you speak to parents often?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we do a lot of research. Before we produced our first episode of Bing, we tested it with 600 children in rural England and London and 600 children in rural America and New York. And we asked them a whole bunch of stuff about emotional development, social development, linguistic development, about their engagement. And interestingly, the results were almost identical in both cultures, which was very reassuring at that time. So, yeah, yes.
Estelle, similar question to you. How do you kind of balance your responsibility of talking to kids about quite challenging topics that some parents might not feel too comfortable about?
So we do have programming. So out of the vast library of content that we've got, we do have programming which addresses some of these topics. And we do get feedback from parents saying, I can't believe you have this type of programming on your channel, I'll never watch it again. I think that we are comfortable with where we are in terms of, the editorial programming that we put on the channel. We're not even talking about, so I'll give you an example, Mark Hormoud's Triple Amputee is part of the Becoming Extraordinary series. It was a big deal for a lot of people having the episode with him where he talks about how he lost both his legs and his arm. We think it's a story worth telling. I think it is important that these stories get told. Equally, we have another series which features, one of the episodes features a drag queen, also talking about his work, his story, and again, a really, really important part of our programming, but again, one where we had some feedback from some of the most conservative parts of the world. And we decided to just keep it on because we feel that it's our duty to actually tell the world's stories, the stories of the world.
And have you found there are any topics that are off limits?
I don't think there are any topics that are off limits, but what is off limit for us is finding a topic that, if we don't feel comfortable with the way that it's been presented, we won't take it on. So there are topics that we would like to have, but we just haven't found something that we thought was elaborated, was made in the way that we would like. And going back to what you said earlier about fun learning, is it more important to laugh or to learn? Everything that we put on the channel, the streaming platforms, has to be engaging before it's educational. If we don't captivate the attention and if we don't make it fun to watch, we know that we've lost our audience. So it's very important for us to even bring that, even in really important topics. I'll give you a quick example of what I mean by that. We were really bored of all the submissions that we were getting about sustainability in the environment. It was all the same thing. There's no planet B. It's all doom and gloom. And we thought, let's seek something which is slightly different. And we found a program which addresses that with food. So it's kids trying food, for example, food from the sea, and understanding why it's important that it exists, because it's environmentally friendly, it replenishes the ecosystem, it's carbon neutral, blah blah. And so just finding an entry point which kids will be fascinated with and just be intrigued is very important.
Thank you. I'm going to come to you, Nigel, just to build out something that you mentioned, and it's a theme that came up whilst we were preparing for this, the hero's journey. And the hero's journey is a strong theme. So how do we ensure that this helps kids in the media that we create, and as opposed to making them feel inadequate?
Yeah, well, like I said, with the sort of the Captain America reference, it's about showing the hero's journey in a realistic way that's not necessarily a straight line. So like when you make a story, you have different stages of the hero's journey from a narrative perspective. But one of the things that's interesting with anime and manga is that you have, like I say, characters who are unsure of their place on that journey. So they've typically been told that, like, this is where you need to get to. So you need to become this great warrior or whatever it might be. But where they are now, they don't feel like that. So it's this, there's loads of examples, but there's an anime called Gurren Lagann, and it's starring this young boy called Simon, and he's been told by his sort of brother, not actual brother, but sort of a very close friend brother, that like he's going to be great. Mm-hmm. Like all the time, he's going to be great. You're gonna like be the absolute best, but he doesn't believe it. For like half the show, he doesn't believe it, and then he eventually loses his brother, and he then has to face that on his own. And I think when it comes to the hero's journey, like he goes on a journey, but it's a journey he spent most of the time with like not feeling adequate. And I think when we create these stories, it's about showing the hard parts of that journey. The like, I'm not sure if I can do this. It's the facing difficult situations, facing failure, things like that through the character's journey, and then what the character learns, adapts, and then reapplies on that journey to then eventually achieve the goal. Spoiler alert, he does achieve the goal, but it's a very good anime. But yeah, so I think it's like how we show the different parts, and as I said, those characters who do doubt themselves and aren't just like, yep, we're going to do this and just go A, B, C, D all the way to the end. It's about showing that sort of bendy road to the eventual goal.
Michael, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that same hero's journey for a preschool IP.
Yes.
How do you tackle it with Bing?
Well, I mean, the hero's journey as such was refined by Joseph Campbell into a schema for storytelling and protagonist journeys. But actually, it goes back to Hestia, the goddess of the hearth, where we all give each other information by telling each other stories. It's human equipment. With a preschooler, a hard-hitting story will be you've just stepped on dog poo, or you've peed yourself in front of your mates in the creche, or Coco, look, I've got a butterfly. Is it dead? Right, that's if you're 3 and you think of the emotional reactions of 3-year-olds, not being able to find Hoppity Bush before you go to bed is distressing. It's not just, oh shit, he can't find his toy. So what we have to do is get ourselves into the mindset, into the frame of reference of being very young, where you're very emotionally porous. If you look carefully, the drama is there. You don't have to contrive it. The disappointments, the expectations, the passions, the exuberance. So what we do, 23 writers over the time, 2 American educationalists, 2 British educationalists, 2 Montessori teachers, a speech and language professor, we put a lot of structure in under the waterline to make the hero's journey for Bing, where he's in every child, he's authentically up against it a lot of the time, and then somebody says, Bing, come and join us, and the ears go back up, and there he is. So we have our own way of doing it, but it's just an age-appropriate way that serves the needs of that audience.
Great. Right. I'm going to come to each one of you in turn, just with a quick fire question, and then we're going to open questions up to the floor. So I'll come back to you again. Sorry, Michael. Where do you source your content and expertise from relating to these topics? Who do you consult?
Everything is a team effort, literally everything. We've got multiple stakeholders, writers, talented teams, actors. We work closely with a whole bunch of advocates and stakeholders for very young children. And a lot of it comes down to writing. All good writing is rewriting. It's all refined. It's a team process, and it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a big team to do something to the standard that we do it.
Yeah. Same to you, Estelle. For your meaningful conversations, who do you look to, and where do you look to?
I think same, really pretty much same answer. I mean, the team. And the feedback that we get from parents and from kids, people that we work with in the industry, organizations that we partner with. Just started talking to the Scouts, for example, through introduction by Bear, who is Chief Scout. So that's also part of, also feeds the ecosystem of everything that we do.
And Nigel?
That's a good question. Where do the ideas come from? So what I try and do is like take in a lot of content and from different mediums, but also within our team, like talk about as a brand, what do we want to say and what do we want to say through the story. So I try and take inspiration from the team, but also just from the world around and influences there. So as a brand, we support like independent creators, and again that hero's journey, and try and build stories around there, and then take from real life, from sort of the silly, like I once had a friend on a trip, he bought an all white suit, he never wore it, but I put it in a story, all the way to one of our latest stories, which is about the journey of trying to build a creative career when everyone around you says you can't, and the struggles through that. So try and take from our real world experiences and put it in a story in a way that will relate to everyone. But if you're that young person who is unsure of their place, who is going through something similar, maybe you can take some lessons from that story as well.
Amazing. Thank you. Right, well, hopefully you found it fascinating thus far. I know I have. I'm going to throw it to you guys. Surely someone... that's reassuring, seeing a hand shoot straight up.
That's all right, yes. No, hello, my name's Sarah. I'm the voice of Miss Rabbit. I'm an educator.
Oh, there's a mic there. If you...
Hello, shall I just repeat myself? Hello, my name's
you.
Sarah. I'm the voice of Miss Rabbit. I am a writer. I've written some stuff for TV, and I'm also an academic. So thank you very much, everyone. It was really, really interesting and enlightening, all the conversations and the presentations. But I wanted to direct my question to Estelle. I just wondered if you'd featured in that extraordinary series any artists or designers within the show, because currently the government art isn't a core subject anymore, and there's no encouragement for students to to be creative, and I kind of feel it's and they don't know how to be, they don't think it's a possible career path, and it would be really great for somebody like you to feature that. I just wondered if it was something that you'd done and we hadn't seen it.
So we don't in the Becoming Extraordinary season 1. We might in season 2. As I said, we are in pre-production for season 2, and all ideas welcome, by the way. We do have other programs that feature artists. We are about to onboard a series called Black Girls Code, which also contains interviews of professionals involved in game design, in coding, computer science, and all kinds of creative professions around. So very excited to have that. And it is really inspiring to also understand what goes on behind the scene of making a game, for example. So yes, watch this space. We're about to launch it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
So can I just add to that?
Please do.
No, because I think it's a very good point. So as well as the work we do with My Mada, I'm also on the London Mayor's Cultural Leadership Board, and talking about topics around how to get young people to be more aware of those careers, because it's something I see, because I engage with a lot of young people who would like to do sort of create careers but don't see a path, or they're told like this isn't a real job. Go and do something else. And what it does, it means when we get to stages like this, there's less people from diverse backgrounds who have made those steps. So what we try and do, like a similar thing about like interviews. So we have a podcast. We do a lot of interviews with people across creative professions, and I think it's important to highlight the journey. So back to the hero's journey, actually, is highlight the journey, because what I found is sometimes if you're like a young person and you see like people at the very top, it's good. It's an aspirational thing, but sometimes it can be too far from where they are to see the path. So we've been mindful of showing people at different levels. I think it's important to show young people at different levels and levels they can relate to see like, okay, here's someone who's doing something that I might want to do, and they went to this school and their parents didn't quite understand either, and they failed in the first job or something like that, but then they learned and they adapted. So I think it's important to show like that side of the story as well.
And what's the name of the organisation you mentioned that you're part of?
So the Mayor's Cultural Leadership Board is basically just advising on the Mayor's strategy when it relates to different parts of like London, like creativity, nightlife, and just because of what I do, my particular niche is like young people and sort of self-employed work and things like that. There's actually a board meeting today, but I'm here instead. So
Nigel is being very humble. It's a huge job.
Thank you.
Great. I see another hand. I see a few hands. Thank you. There's one there at the back. Oh, we've got one there. Oh, you got a mic?
Oh, hi. Wasn't sure who's going next. My name's Una. I'm the exec on BBC Bite Size, so we make transformational educational experiences from reception right up to GCSE. Really lovely examples there. I was thinking about conversation. So what we know about children now is that they're in media spaces where they really expect to be able to contribute to the conversation. So whether that's in the metaverse or whether that's on social media. So the lovely examples we've been hearing are really about one-way storytelling, about stories that we are making for children to consume. Can the panel think of any great examples of these sort of transformative emotional development stories that are situated where children and young people can contribute to them and sort of have that expectation met that they are part of that conversation.
Estelle, is that something that you do with your platforms?
A little bit. Again, not on social media channels per se, but we have worked with a company called Cut in the US, and they have a series which we love, which is essentially kids asking questions to grown-ups. And it's completely unfiltered, and they get to ask questions, any questions they want. They get to meet people from all walks of life. They all have a different journey. They could be a firefighter, they could be a gynecologist, it could be, really a former, one of them has been in jail and was an inmate, and then became actually a graphic designer during the time that he was there, and so has a really interesting story. So just to give you examples, and it's really interesting and really fascinating to hear the questions and the contribution that they bring to a conversation. It's a really compelling viewing. I definitely recommend it.
Michael.
Obviously now we have this extraordinary ability to communicate in both directions, and we have about 500,000 people following us on various socials, and every day we get, mainly from adults obviously, given our target audience, my child is wetting and Bing helps because my child isn't eating, my child is autistic and Bing helps because my child is biting his sister, a lot. But we do also get messages from children. We get artwork, we get drawings. I got a suggestion last week about couldn't we have a new character in Bing, and here's a drawing of this new character, and it's a dog called Kipper. Those of you who know children's publishing well enough might know that that's a slot that's already taken. But as Estelle just said, all ideas are welcome. So in the writing phase, we get a load of input, from everybody.
And Nigel, you did mention that you speak to your audience a lot. How do you take on board the conversations you have with them in the creative process?
It's a funny one. So I think that it's a good point, because what I'm always mindful of is making young people aware that they can be producers and not just consumers. I don't mean literally the role producer, but creators. And so when we do, for example, workshop sessions, where there's one formal session where we'll help young people create their own characters and stories and go through the process. But what I've tried to do is also, because we've got stories in progress and stories that we're working on, is share those ideas with them. So one, it's a way to say the thing that you're doing, I'm also doing, so I'm also working on these ideas. But then also say what do you think, and how do you think, one, does this story make sense to you? What other ideas might you have, and have that conversation with them. And then in more formal ways of we provide work experience opportunities, and we've had interns in the past, and also been mindful of having them share their voice. And I remember one in particular, when they gave feedback at the end, they were one of the things that surprised them is that one, I asked them for their opinion, and two, I actually listened to it, and I was like, yeah, that's kind of the idea why you're here. It's you have a voice, use it. And I also said, if it's a bad idea, I'll tell you, and just not use it. But if it's a good idea, then we'll kind of discuss it. And I think it's important to have that side of the conversation as well.
Thank you. Right, lady in red at the back, thank you for waving. It's quite tricky to see from this light.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Lottie Owell from King Banana TV.
Hello.
And I think, like you guys up on the panel, we like to make meaningful, impactful content, the younger end of the audience, like Michael's. And so we measure that a lot by stories from parents that we hear back about things that we're making. And I just wanted to ask a really positive question, really, and ask you guys all if you had any really good stories about feedback that you've had about your content, and stories or themes across the board that you found that have been particularly impactful.
That's a lovely question. Michael.
I mean, we get thousands of pieces of feedback. A typical one will be, when my child wakes in the middle of the night, Bing consoles them because it's calming and soothing. Even if Bing goes through something quite dramatic, it's engaging, it draws them out of themselves. I mean thousands, to do with food, eating, nutrition. Young children, 2, 3, 4, have immense difficulties learning how to share, how to be impatient. I mean, here's a simple example, right? It's a simple example. Somebody gives you a 2-litre bottle of milk and asks you to go and pour something out while they're talking to you. As an adult, you'll bum the fridge closed, you'll do this, you'll say cha cha cha, and you'll do like that, and you're multitasking. If you give a 2-year-old a 2-litre bottle of milk, they go, then they pour it very slowly, the milk runs all over their fingers, they drop it on the table and it glumps out onto the floor and they burst into tears. You get me? This is reframing the perceptual value of a piece of storytelling. So we literally, through social, the power of... Can I just say one other thing? I know it's a long answer, but the iPlayer issues metrics, right? In 2020, the top 10 programmes in the BBC in the UK were number 1, Killing Eve, obviously, number 2, Normal People, number 3, Bing Fireworks, right? In the old version of measurement, there was no way of showing how important this programming is at home and how important this audience is. Now we can measure it, we can prove it. This is as important in the household for a family as the mainstream drama is. So we get a lot of feedback from people, and a lot of it is, I say, our overall culture and our community are grateful, positive, thoughtful, sincere, and we work with them on that basis.
Great, thank you. Estelle, what are those nice stories that stick in your mind?
I mean, I do have a funny story that happened in my family when we released the first episode of Becoming Extraordinary. It's the one with Roger Federer. And we released it on Sunday of the French Open, the first Sunday of the French Open, purely for search optimization purposes. But we made a big think about it in my family. It was the launch, the premiere, and we had the kids in the room, and we invited a few of our neighbors, and we watched it. And my 10-year-old was not having any of it, no interest whatsoever. And so she finally decided to join, and just before we started, she said, "And who the hell is Roger Federer anyway?" And so, which was fine, because we, as I said, we focus on the backstories, and the limelight, the big red carpet moment, the winning the trophy is not really the purpose of that series. It's really hearing the trials and tribulations and the journey, and all the obstacles and challenges and the successes as well. So that was fine, but it just made me think that maybe for season 2 we could have Blackpink, for example. We have a very interesting story, having left their countries to fly to Korea and to become massive pop stars. So, yeah.
And how about for you, Nigel?
Yeah, I was trying to think of, there's a few. There's one in particular recently. So the story that I showed on the video series, that was from the volume 1. And during the pandemic, I wrote a follow-up story where those characters, having established their business, had to go through a pandemic-like situation. And I kind of did that. Well, one, there was nothing else to do. And but also it was good for me to put a lot of what I was seeing, what I was feeling into a story and work that through. So in 2022, so last year, I was in a session it was not a young person or a younger than me person, but he's in his early 20s. And I think when I met him, he had been through some difficult times. I think he'd recently had a transplant and was out of work for the extended period of time. And yeah, just mental health and issues and that. And I think at the end of the session, I gave people some copies of the book, and he messaged me afterwards, and he just it basically, the story touched him, and he said I wish I had this when I was going through thing. And it's nice to hear, because as I'm sure any sort of writers in the room, you write a lot of this and you're alone, and you forget that people actually people read it, and then it has an impact. So that was a nice reminder.
Great, thank you. Right, well, we're almost to time, so there's a couple of things that I would just like to say in wrap-up, and I do hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you again for coming along.